Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, members of the Iraqi government, leaders from across the Middle East, members of the global community, and last but not least, to my family, to my people, the people of Kurdistan, it is such a pleasure and the honor and the privilege to finally have an opportunity to be united and connected with my people. I was in Paris in November, and I met a dear sister who is one of the contributing factors to me speaking to you today. Her name was Nasim Issa. When we met in Paris and she told me that she's from Kurdistan, the first thing that I told her that, are you aware that I am actually your brother? I am sure looking at my pigmentation, she was a bit confused about this African calling himself her brother. But I'll explain that brief in my address. Historically, there's always been bridges that were built among and between the oppressed people from across the world, from the oppressed black people in South Africa to the oppressed Kurdish people in Turkey, in Syria, in Iraq, and across the Middle East, including the people of Palestine. There's always been a relationship, and there should always be a relationship between these people. For to us, just like ourselves, the Kurdish people were fighting for their rights to self-determination. They were fighting for equal access to universal rights as declared by the United Nations. The mode or the understanding from the previous generation was that having a resemblance or a semblance of unity and solidarity between the oppressed and marginalized people around the world made perfect sense, for we were stronger when we are together. When General Mustafa Barzani took over the leadership of the Kurdish people in 1946, Mandela and his generation drew lessons and strategies and tactics from the strategies, from the resilience, from the strength that the Kurdish people had in waging a relentless fight for their own self-determination. When Mandela and his generation were arrested in the 1960s, leading up to the 1990s, it was the Kurdish people, it was the people of Palestine that stood with us. Even though you were fighting for your own freedom, you were able to take a moment and remember Mandela and his generation. Many of you, while you were at college, you had placards, you mobilized strikes, fighting and calling for Mandela to be free from prison. That is why when Mandela and his generation finally gained their own freedom and independence in 1990, and we eventually were ushered into a democratic dispensation in 1994, Mandela was quoted and boldly saying, Our freedom is not complete until the freedom of the people of Palestine and the people of the Kurdish people from across the Middle East. When Mandela rejected the Atatürk Peace Prize as given by the Turkish government in 1992, it was a clear declaration and affirmation that we stand with the Kurdish people in their fight for self-determination. We stand with the Kurdish people in their fight for access to basic human rights as declared by United Nations in 1948. It was a clear declaration that our freedom is not complete until our leader, until our brother, until our father, General Abdullah Öcalan, is free from prison. That is why today I am here to make this declaration that the Mandela family, that the people of South Africa, that the African people still stand with the Kurdish people to say, in your struggle for self-determination, in your struggle for freedom, in the struggle for a complete freedom of all Kurdish people from across the Middle East, from Syria to Turkey, from Iraq to Iran, we stand with you in that fight. For we identify with the Kurdish people, for we share similar struggles. Throughout history from 1920 up to date, the Kurdish people have always been soulmates in the struggle for freedom with black people in South Africa and across the African continent. So to the younger generation of Kurdish people from across the Middle East, I say perhaps it is the time that as the younger generation, we pick the baton from the older generation and remember that there's always been bridges between us. Maybe it's time we rebuild those bridges. Maybe it's time we establish a platform where we can come together as young people from South Africa and across Africa and across the Middle East to devise strategies and tactics on how to continue to support the Kurdish people and all the oppressed people from across the Middle East in order for them to gain their own independence, in order for them to have equal access to Universal Declaration of Human Rights as declared by the United Nations in 1948. It is for that reason I am saying, you are my people. I'm one of yours. My great-grandfather, Nelson Mandela, made that clear, that our freedom is not complete until you achieve your right to self-determination, until you have your own access to human rights as declared by United Nations, until the Kurdish people are given their own autonomy. Our position is that the Arab people and the Kurdish people can coexist as one. So it is for that reason to say, we will always remain clear across every government that continues to oppress and that continues to marginalize the Kurdish people from Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. We will always be clear to say leaders such as Abdullah Öcalan deserve to be free. And the Kurdish people deserve the right to self-determination. And I am saying to the leaders here today, you must continue to strengthen those relations with South Africa. And you must continue to strengthen those relations with Africa. For throughout history, we've always identified with one another as one people, for we shared a similar struggle. I thank you.